Hello everyone, my name is Jake Matthews and I'm the online editor for HR Grapevine. First of all, welcome to today's webinar. I will be with Geoffroy de Lestrange, the Head of Product Marketing EMEA at Cornerstone on Demand. Today we will be looking at the critical elements required to deliver a corporate development strategy that truly and demonstratively impacts the business. Myself and Geoffroy will be monitoring any questions you post throughout the webinar and we'll get to them all at the end. Over to you, Geoffroy.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Geoffroy de Lestrange. As you can guess, I'm based in the Paris office of Cornerstone, and I'm in charge of product marketing in Europe. Today I would like to talk about talent, learning and development, and how this has to be linked to your business value, how you can impact the business thanks to your development strategy. We'll be using those 4 keywords: simple, faster, smarter and better, because we believe that they describe some interesting ways for you to tackle these issues. So first of all, if we want to start, I'm going to use a few quotes in this presentation. I hope it doesn't sound too posh, sorry about that, but I do like quotes when they are nicely written and exactly express what I want to say. There is this very famous author here in the UK that you probably all know and have read, Hartley, who wrote that the past is a foreign country, they do things differently there. And I think that's true in learning and development. There are many things that we used to do that don't work anymore today, and there are many things that are common today that were just completely outlandish just 5 or 10 years ago. Just mentioning 1 or 2 examples, everything around social learning and knowledge sharing is actually quite new thanks to the huge development of social networks over the last 10 years. The same goes with the mobile technology. Accessing content from anywhere and creating content from anywhere are also things that are rather new thanks to the development of smartphones. So what are your challenges today? We can see 2 different points of view. The first one would be the company point of view. If you want to work for your organization properly, you need to move away from central structured planning, which might have been the norm a few years back, but which would be today way too administrative and heavy. Then you also need, obviously, to support digital transformation. By the way, during this presentation, I will show you some results of a survey we did last year with IDC. And I can already advertise the fact that we are doing a new version of the same survey this year on digital transformation, which results shall be published in June in the UK. But there's one finding that I've just heard from the analysts recently from this year, 2017, which said that about a third of the respondents still had not started a proper digital transformation, which is very surprising, and that's a European-wide finding. I am convinced that HR in general and the L&D department in particular have a very important role to play in making the company's digital transformation successful. And one way to show that it's been successful is obviously to measure what you do. Measuring the impact of learning and development and of any HR activity has become absolutely key to make HR a key part of the business. I don't really like naming HR a business partner, because a supplier would be a partner, but HR is not a business partner. HR is in the business. HR should be at the heart of the business, which is why measuring is absolutely key. But then you also need to take into account each and every one need across the company, not just the company-wide point of view, but the individual point of view. Each employee has a different skill set, has a different vision, may have different wishes for the future. So you also need to have this individual approach to understand everyone's specific needs, to speed up time to competency at an individual and a team level, and obviously to try and increase motivation and engagement. Today, and I'll be transparent, being a software vendor myself, when you talk to solution providers in the market, more often than not, they will either take the point of view of the organization, and that would usually be the established vendors, or they will specifically focus on the individual point of view, and that's what you would see from startups at HR trade shows, for example. We believe at Cornerstone that you need to take those two points of view. You need the point of view of the organization because you will need to be able to manage complex processes, you will need to ensure that everyone is compliant, you will need to train everyone on your own products and methods and services, but also you will need to speak to everyone at an individual level to ensure that you get the best out of every talent in the company. So how to do this? Well, the first element is to try and make things simple. And it's not as easy as that. As Da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, which is true. Sometimes we try and make things simple, but actually we end up with very long process that make things way too complex. So what Deloitte advises us to do here is to enable continuous learning. Who knows best what they need but your employees themselves? If I am working on a specific project, I know what kind of skill sets I may need, and I will try and get them myself. And if I can't find them via my learning and development colleagues, then I will just Google it. But you want to also help people find what they need thanks to your help, because you will be able to target much more what would be needed. So the idea here is to move from a push strategy to a pull strategy. This pull mentality that you want to develop is really to try and make people hunters of the skill set they need. The idea is to enable an easy and open access to all the content that you can provide, also with mobile device. You know, that's the famous at a word, anytime, anywhere, any device that you need to make possible, not just because it's a buzzword, but really because there might be specific moments where I need a specific information, and this can be at a client site, this can be remotely at a trade show or in the office, and anywhere I am, I need to have access to the information I need. And this needs to be focused on business needs, and that's where you have a very important role to play. Of course, anyone can spend some time on YouTube or Google to try and find information, but you are in the company, you are part of the business, so you know what kind of information will be useful. You can already play the content curator in looking for competitive information, for example, or in trying to give an easy access to product-related information, or to try and find internally who would be the best persons to talk to on specific topics, and I'll get back to that one because it's very important. If I use those data from the survey we did last year with IGC, you can see on the screen 2 or 3 figures that I'd like to mention. The first one at the top would be rather positive, rather, but not 100%, because only 6 line managers out of 10 in Europe believe that HR offers training for people management skills. And that's maybe something where you need to put some effort. And that's a simple thing to do because you're used to training people into leadership and soft skills, but it needs to be done probably earlier in the process, as soon as someone is in a succession planning for a management position, not when that person starts his or her new role. And then there are 2 other figures which I'd like to zoom in, which are rather bad news at the bottom of that page. The first one shows that only half of line managers across Europe are convinced that HR provide them with proper tools to recruit, reward, and retain talent. And I remember an article in the CIPD website some months ago which listed all the qualities that HR should expect from a line manager. And this list was huge. HR was really expecting line managers to be able to recruit people, select people, train people, coach, reward, maybe sometimes fire, and there was a list of 10, 15 elements that HR was expecting from line managers. But if they are not properly trained, and if they believe that they don't have the proper tools to do it, how can they do a good job as managers? Which brings me to the last one at the bottom of the page. 4 managers out of 10 in Europe are frustrated because of HR. And this, as you can see, is underestimated by HR managers themselves. So that one should be a big question mark for HR across Europe on how they should have a more regular conversation with line managers to anticipate their needs and provide them with the proper tools and trainings. Some examples of things you could do. I've mentioned mobile learning already, but it's not just the fact that you can access content from anywhere. Mobile has another huge and, in my opinion, more important impact. Mobile is cheap. If you think about it for a minute, a computer, whether it be a desktop or a laptop, is actually quite expensive. It costs a few £100 if you want a good quality hardware. But what about a tablet? An Android tablet is cheap. You can get fairly good tablets for maybe £100. And if you have people in a shop or on the factory floor or in a restaurant or a hotel, you can have a single hardware that can be shared by different people. It makes it even cheaper. What's the impact? The impact here with this simple tool, because everyone knows how to use a tablet, means that you increase your talent pool. And I have a case study of a client who did that in the logistics industry. They had trouble in finding their future team lead managers. So using our technology and mobile on the factory floor, or warehouse actually in that case, they could identify their future managers within the warehouse teams. And so they could solve their lack of resources in terms of leadership within their own teams. This would have been way more difficult just 5 years ago because not everyone in the warehouse would have had access to learning and development content and technology. Giving access to interesting content means that you need to be able to target the content. I assume all of you have bought at least once some things on an e-commerce website, for example Amazon.com or .co.uk. You always have some recommendations. And as you can see on that screenshot, there are 2 sorts of recommendations. There are the recommendations from the users themselves, and that's this little star system. But you also have the automatic recommendations based on user patterns, which is based on big data analysis. And that's something that is accessible today to HR. That's a solution that we at Cornerstone provide in our learning module because we have 30 million users on our platform. So there are technologies today that will help you suggest interesting and targeted content to your own users. I've talked about making things simple, but you also have to make things faster. I really like that quote from philosopher and scientist Blaise Pascal. I'm writing a long letter because I don't have time to write a short one. Sometimes it's actually easier and faster for us to do something which at the end of the day will be longer and burdensome for the end user. So making things faster is actually not as easy as it seems. IDC, in one of the white papers we've produced with them, wrote that the L&D manager had to work in close relationship with business leaders, starting with identification of key skills and competencies, and work on a plan to invest and reinvest on employees. The point is, when we talk about speed, every stakeholder has a different definition of speed. If I start with what I believe is the most important one, the employee, what they need is on-demand knowledge. I need an information right now, but I also need more longer-term development opportunities. So you have those two situations, the situation where I'm working on a specific project and I have an immediate question, and the situation where I want to plan for my own longer-term development and maybe in 6 months' time apply to a new position. And I also know that I need to develop some new skill sets. So you need to answer those two elements via, sorry about that, sorry, using your learning platform. Easy way to find quick content right now, but also easy and quick access to longer-term development opportunity. If I'm a line manager, my main concern, and that's something we've seen in the IDC survey as well, is time to competency. I have a team, I miss a skill, I want it right now. And I'll go to the L&D department and say, hey, I need you to tell me which guy in my team would be the best to be trained for that skill and will be the most efficient in the future. If I am HR, an L&D manager, my definition of speed would be an easy administration, a consolidated view of all my delegates, a simple content creation, and application to new types of content. And if I am among the C-suite, I want to be able to find talent immediately. If I want to create a project team for a new product launch or a new market, I want to have an easy access to the talents in my own company in a very visual way, and if needed, know who I should train to new skills for that project. So you need to take all those definitions of speed into account, including your own as an L&D manager. Which means that you need to be up to date when it comes to understanding your own people's performance. And performance management is actually extremely linked to learning and development. It's not a separate topic. It's not something that you just address once a year with a performance review. That was the old way, where we used to do things differently. Today, you need regular discussions. And the figures you see on the screen are the 2016 figures. I had a glance at the 2017 figures, which are even higher when it comes to regular discussions on performance review, employee development, and even on compensation, even if that one remains mostly yearly. Those three conversations are actually closely linked to performance management as a whole. You need to have regular performance discussions if you want to know your team's strengths and weaknesses. once you know that, you are able to have a positive conversation on training and development. And once your people have improved and work better and do a better job, obviously they need to be rewarded. So all those topics are actually one way or another linked to how fast you can serve people once you know their real performance. Just some examples here of what would be an immediate need for knowledge. That's when you are working in sales or client service. Those are two very simple examples where I might be competing against someone else at a prospect, and I want to know my competitors' strengths and weaknesses. Or I'm sitting in the client service desk, a client has an urgent question, I need to have an immediate access at a series of answers to help my client. And if I give here the example of the top management, I insist on that one because that's one example which shows how you, as HR and L&D manager, can prove to the C-suite that you really impact the business with practical knowledge of your team's skills. You can tell your C-level, your CEO, COO, or whomever, I've trained people in the company, I've done regular performance reviews. You can do simple queries in the system to check which employee has certain skill sets for a certain project. That's extremely important, and that's extremely strategic from an organization point of view. So you've done things simple, you've done things faster, you also need to work smarter. What does that mean? Well, that means certainly not making things complex. I love that quote from Oscar Wilde. Smart doesn't mean complicated. And I'll go a bit deeper into details here. There is a German analyst and university professor called Armin Trost. He's based near Stuttgart, and at Cornerstone we do quite a lot of work with him in the German-speaking market. And I really like his definition of learning that you see on the screen. Learning means solving a problem, and it happens in groups. That's very clever. I really like this quote because that's how you can work smarter. More brains, of course, means more intelligence. So you need to foster collaboration. You need to enable knowledge sharing and social learning. This starts also with management input, because you need to understand what will be the company direction and strategy in the future, define your HR and learning and development strategy out of that, and apply it to your team based on what they already know and how they want to get new knowledge. And you also need to take into account people that are not in the organization but are part of its ecosystem, more specifically resellers, partners, but also suppliers. So the reason I'm mentioning social learning is one of the most interesting findings of the survey we did with IDC. As you can see on the screen, we've seen that there was a very strong correlation between high growth organizations and social learning and collaboration practices. And I mean active social collaboration practices. If you look at the first two lines on the screen, the first one is employees are encouraged to work together, and the second one is there is a system to aid collaborative learning. In both cases, it means that the company management and HR have invested in social collaboration and that there is a tool to do it, not just lip service. So what this means very clearly is that high growth organizations share more. That's a very interesting finding, which is clearly proven here with those data. So, of course, it's not a one-to-one relationship, but it's a correlation. It's a good practice that you need to think about. How can I apply social learning practices in my own organization, whatever my growth might be? And I'll show you some examples. You need to develop a culture of knowledge sharing, and the best way to do this is to engage with your internal experts. Now, the question is, how do I know who are my internal experts? Well, I'll go back to what I said before about performance management. That's one way, especially continuous performance feedback is one great way to know who are your internal experts. But there are other ways, and one is, if you want that example, using social badges, a bit like the like in Facebook. It's what we used to do 5 years ago via email. You work on a project, someone in the team is helping you and helps you succeed. What did you do before? What did you do 5 years ago? Politely, you would send a mail to that person, copying his or her manager and writing a nice note. Thank you for your help on that project. You helped me be successful. That's what we used to do. Today, we can do things more socially using corporate social networks. You can give a positive badge to someone, such as the team player badge, and write the same sort of positive comments on how that person helped you be successful. You can make a test. Another way to do it is to talk to new hires. If you talk to people that have joined your company, let's say 6 months ago, and you ask them a simple question, if there is something you don't know, whom do you ask, apart from your manager? Who is your go-to person? Well, you might be surprised because that new hire might tell you, oh, you know what, in my department, there's that person. He or she has been in the company for 5 years or 10 years, and they know everything. Any question, any thing I need, he or she will tell me how to do it or whom I should ask. Those are your experts, and you don't want to lose them. And I'll give you a counter example. Try and remember the name of someone who left your company on his or her own accord, say 1 year ago or more, or 2 years ago. And now have a look at their LinkedIn profile and ask yourself, did I know that that person was able to do everything that he or she has been doing since they left my company? That's usually a rather cruel test, to be honest. I've done it with some of my former colleagues, and honestly, that in my previous company, I saw how we could have lost some talents. And I remember telling my former manager at the time that we should have tried and kept them. So that's an exercise you can do to convince yourself how useful it is to engage with your internal experts. And one way you can engage them is in enabling user-generated content. I'll give you a very precise example. Let's say you are a manufacturing business, and you have that person in the factory who is the best at manning a very complex machine. Well, then you can take your own smartphone, which you already have, you film that person manning the machine, and that makes a learning object. The production cost of this learning content is nil, and you can even have that person in the corporate social network receiving the questions from other people working on the same machine. So that's a very good way, very practical way to engage with your own internal experts and making them content creators. The same goes with self-learning. In terms of technique, that's what you might have read called XAPI or Tin Can. If I am, let's say, a sales director and I'm sitting in the underground reading a very interesting article in the Financial Times about one of my competitors, I can simply forward that link as a learning object to my team of salespeople, telling them, hey guys, read that article, very interesting on the competition. And that becomes a learning object. That's the kind of thing you can do. The last element I mentioned on that topic was to engage with your ecosystem. Well, what I mean with ecosystem is supply chain on the one hand and distribution network on the other hand until your own clients. Actually, at Cornerstone, we use our own extended enterprise solution to engage with our clients, to provide them with learning and information on our quarterly releases and user groups and many different topics. The supply chain is an interesting one because it's not something that we mention usually if you read experts' article on that topic. But supply chain is very important. What happens if one of your suppliers was not compliant in a factory located in another country and some terrible accident occurs? At some point, it will fall back onto you. It will be considered by the public as being your own responsibility, even if the legal entity is completely different. So if you have defined very precise procedures and compliance on security, just to take that example, you need to ensure that your entire supply chain is actually really compliant. And actually, you can also use mobile technology to ensure that they are indeed compliant on the field. But you also need to train your partners, you need to train your resellers. Typical example would be a reseller network in the automotive industry. That's kind of obvious. But also your clients. If you train your clients properly, you may have lower support needs. And the last step is how to work better, how to train better, how to make your learning and development strategy better. That's a more serious quote here from Albert Camus, which I put in there because, well, first because he happens to be my favorite author. I hope you'll pardon me. But also because it goes back to a key word, which is autonomy. You need to ensure that you stay relevant, and I'm quoting Ernst & Young's former CLO about that. And how can you stay relevant if you enable people to do things themselves better? Your employees know what they need to work better, and I like this concept of reinvention by the famous analyst Josh Bersin. So you need to enable autonomy, and I'll get back to that one. You need to measure what you do. I've talked about it already, but it's true. That's the way you will prove that what you do impacts the business. And if you can bring figures to your CEO or to your CFO proving that what you have done on a pilot project was successful, they will trust you with more budget and more opportunity to do new things in the future. You need to be practical and define clear commitments. When you talk to a line manager, you need to be very precise in what he or she needs for the team and what he or she expects at the end of a training process, for example. But you also need to anticipate and predict, that's the difficult part, future needs. The reason why I'm insisting on autonomy is that we've seen in this survey last year with IDC a strong correlation between autonomy and happiness at work. And we define happiness as being proud to work for one's company and willing to recommend it. And here are the results across Europe. The European average was 71%, which was exactly that figure for the UK as well. The Nordics were way better, and Italy was the lowest in Europe. So I'm not here diving in different countries. The message here is simply to say that the #1 correlation criteria was the opportunity to be able to move within the organization. And all the others that follow were related to flexible working, autonomy in organizing one's work, which is directly linked to another keyword, which is trust. Trusting your people to apply and move upwards in your company, trusting your people to organize how they work is the best way you will make them proud to work for you and willing to recommend and bring in new talents. But how can you work better? Well, in this survey, once again, we asked that question: what are the areas of improvement for HR in Europe? And we asked HRs and line managers. And actually, the main finding, as you can see on the screen, is the fact that there is no clear area of improvement that stands out. There are quite a few of them, maybe the top 6 if you want, that is considered as an area of improvement by about 1/3 of all respondents. But if I want to sum up all of them, I will zoom into 2 elements. The first one is the one at the top, faster HR procedures, so that's lean HR. Basically, from a line manager point of view, this means leave me alone and don't bother me with admin stuff. How can you ensure that the non-business related tasks of HR are running in the background efficiently and quickly without limiting the speed of the business? And the second one is everything around time to competency, whether it be via learning or recruiting. I am a team lead, I need skills in my team, I want them now. Those are the 2 key elements that really stand out of that survey in order to work better. So how do you do it when you apply that to learning and development? Well, you can use this matrix from IDC, that's one of their models, I'm using it right now, where basically you will sort out the skills that you are working on according to that matrix. What is needed now, what will be needed in the future. And depending on where it's located in that matrix, you will decide whether to invest, whether to train and cultivate, or whether to outsource. Obviously, something which is important now and in the future is a strong area of investment on your L&D budget. But do not underestimate skills that are important now but may not be important in the future, because those might be related to your cash cow and you don't want to kill them right now. So that's 2 examples on how you can work on the different skill sets that you may need in your company. Measuring is key. You can use the business intelligence and big data analytics technologies that are available in order to anticipate future needs. What you see on the screen, for example, at the bottom, is a screenshot of our predictive compliance tool, where we can really help anticipate compliance risks and see which learning and development strategy will ensure that you have the highest respondents rate in the shortest time frame. You need to anticipate future skills gaps, which relates to succession planning and mobility. That one is really important because you will be able to combine individual wishes with company strategy. If I look at the screenshot at the top of the screen with the example of Sam, well, we see that Sam is looking at a new position for which is almost ready and his potential is almost at its maximum. And in order to reach 100%, the system will give him some advice on trainings that he should follow. And you don't see it there, but we will also see the probable impact of each training. So it can go very, very deep into the predictive results of a training. So in order to conclude on what we've said, in order to make HR simple, faster, smarter, and better, I'll give 10 tips that should start with, help you start with your planning and thoughts in that direction. I will not go over the 10 of them. I will just zoom into one or two. The first one is to start with your pain points. Why? Because you will never convince your CEO or especially your CFO or your IT director to start a company-wide project if you are a company of thousands of people, if you do not prove that you've been efficient. So it's better to try and see where you are having a headache right now and make it your pilot project, whether it be in a specific subsidiary or specific region or specific area or hierarchy level or new hires or new leaders, you name it. You can zoom and create a pilot project for this specific target group with very precise metrics on how you will analyze the results and prove that you've been successful. Based on that, you can create a business case to your top management. And you need to foster collaboration. That one is important because you will be able to find project ambassadors in the different teams. They may be the team leads or not, but they will be people whom you will engage in using the tool, in creating content, in engaging people, in sharing knowledge, and that will make your project successful, and it will also help you get very targeted and useful and business-related content almost immediately. And of course, you need to be agile and get constant feedback. That would be my final words on that presentation. We have not only a white paper based on that, we also have the IDC survey that I mentioned, which is available. So if you want to get access to those top tips with a bit more detail and receive the smart paper which is related to this content, please go on that webpage, cornerstoneondemand.co.uk/make-it. And if you want to receive the IDC survey, just contact us via that same website. Thank you very much, and please don't hesitate to ask any questions.
Cool. Hello, Geoffroy. I do have one question here. This is going back to the data you said midway through the presentation. It's from John. He says, how can HR processes become less of a source of management frustration? What key tip would you give for that?
That's a good question. So I will move away from learning and development and go a bit deeper into admin tasks of HR. Well, first, you need to limit and, if possible, reduce as much as possible the things that need to be typed in the system. So one way to do it is simply to enable employee and manager self-service. There are many pieces of information that actually come from the employee or the manager themselves. So let them put them inside. Then you need to have some workflow to make some processes simpler. For example, if you have a simple absence management process, you don't need to make things very, very complex with different levels of approval. See how you can streamline that kind of process in order to make it less time consuming. Then there is a topic which I have not really mentioned today, which is really key, that's the relationship with the IT department. There are many pieces of information that might be in other systems, typically in a payroll system, for example. Well then, how can you check that you interface with that system in order to retrieve the information that you need in the most efficient way? This is even more important if you are an international company with people in different countries, languages, time zones, currencies, where you have to manage 10, 15 different payroll systems, so you will want to have a single learning and talent management system. Obviously, this topic of interfacing will become key, and that's a topic which is both for HR and IT. That's one more example. And then, of course, you need to have a simple access to the information you need as HR. So when you talk to solution providers like us or others, be very precise when it comes to reporting, dashboards, business intelligence, graphic data visualization, predictive analytics, and so on. So how can you be sure that you get useful, actionable data quickly without needing to spend months in being trained in any complex statistics systems? So those are different examples on how you can be faster and you can streamline some procedures. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. I have one more question, and this is specifically related to the discussions about autonomy earlier on. Essentially says, how can the C-suite be convinced to trust staff with greater autonomy when it comes to things such as self-learning, which is essentially trusting them to do it instead of being in a work environment and conducting learning that way?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because, as I said, it goes back to the question of trust. As I said at the very beginning of the presentation, you need a healthy mix of top-down learning. A typical example would be compliance or security or new product training and so on, and knowledge sharing. And as I said before, the fact is, and it's a fact, that you have your internal experts in-house. And the data we've shown from this IDC survey, but there are many other data going in the same direction, prove that there is this correlation between autonomy and trust and happiness at work. And we know, just to take that example, that recommendation happens to be the most efficient way to recruit. There are many analyses that show that when you hire someone via recommendation, the retention rate is much higher and the performance is higher as well. But you need to be aware that if I recommend someone, I take two risks as an employee. I take a risk with my friend and I take a risk with my company. If that person is not good, the company will tell me, hey, your recommendation was bad, that you're not, I can't trust you anymore. And if my friend is not happy, he or she will get back to me and tell me, hey, that's disappointing, you were not a real friend when you advised me to join your company. So if I really do it, it means that I'm convinced that my friend will be a strong value added for my company, and I will only do it if I trust my company too. So that's why recommendation happens to be the most efficient way to recruit. And by the way, as an anecdote, that's our main way to recruit at Cornerstone. It's about a third of our recruitment go via recommendation. So that's one example. And it also lowers recruitment costs. And that is something you can measure. You can measure recruitment costs, you can measure retention risk, flight risk, and retention rate. So if you can see that there is an improvement in those metrics, you will be able to bring data to the C-suite. What is more, they need the information too. if I am a CEO or a CEO or a CFO, you name it, I need data-driven information so that I can make a proper decision. So if I am a sales director and I want to create a new subsidiary in a new country, I need to ensure that the performance and skilled data I have in my system are up to date. And the best way to keep them up to date is to include data that is given by the employees themselves, including where they feel they are good, and they may ask for 360 or peer reviews to justify that, and also what they wish to do in the future. And if you can bring that together, the company strategy with your own employee development wishes, that if you can join them, that's where you will be the most successful, because your employee motivation will fit to the company strategy. I hope that's clear enough.
Yeah, I think it does. I've got one final question, this time from Fiona.
Mm-hmm.
This is more about the 10 tips you gave at the end of the webinar. Basically says, how could one secure collaboration company-wide? What's the challenge of that, and how can that be overcome?
That's a challenge indeed. And actually the main challenge here, the main question mark, is time management. Because at the end of the day, whether it's about top-down learning or collaboration and so on, people need to find the proper time to do it, and they need to be pushed to do it. And this may be different in each company based on the company culture. I'll give a few examples. 3M came with this very famous 15% concept, which Google then transformed into 20%. And that's the percentage of time that you can use to do your own personal projects. And of course, then that's something you share afterwards. Another example is Danone, which has this famous one learning a day strategy, where everyone should have time to train on different topics once a day. At Cornerstone, our own HR department came, I think, 2 years ago, if I'm not wrong, with this brilliant idea of what we call development days. And that's one day every 4 to 6 weeks, where basically employees train employees on any topic based on, and it's completely based on voluntary basis. So it can be work-related. It can also be completely non-work related. And I did it myself. I did 2 trainings. One was a training on social networks. It was kind of work-related because I'm a marketing person, so I trained my colleagues on how to best use LinkedIn and Twitter and so on in a work environment. And I did another one on languages. Language is a topic that fascinates me. I like reading about languages and trying to learn language and so on. So I did a training on European languages. Nothing to do with work. It's just something that I found interesting from an intellectual point of view, and I wanted to share it with my colleagues. So that's an example. So basically, you would try to find time, one way or another, based on your own company culture, for people to share knowledge. And then you need to motivate them to do it, which means some sort of almost community management skills, which might already be in HR, or maybe you would need to train the HR department in this specific skill, or maybe even hire a community manager, for example.
Cool. Thank you for that, Geoffrey. It was a great answer. I think that's all we have time for today, but just one final comment from Anita, who wanted to say thank you to you, but she had to leave now.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, just for everyone that's still listening, this slide and a YouTube link hosted via HR Grapevine will be sent to everyone so you can see it again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day, everyone.